As Allied troops entered and occupied German territory during the later stages of World War II, mass rapes of women took place both in connection with combat operations and during the subsequent occupation of Germany. Scholars agree that the majority of the rapes were committed by Soviet occupation troops. The wartime rapes had been surrounded by decades of silence. According to historian Anthony Beaver, whose books were banned in 2015 from some Russian schools and colleges, NKVD, Soviet secret police files have revealed that the leadership knew what was happening, but did little to stop it. It was often rear echelon units who committed the rape. According to Professor Oleg Zheshevsky, 4,148 Red Army officers and many privates were punished for committing atrocities. The exact number of German women and girls raped by Soviet troops during the war and occupation is uncertain, but historians estimate their numbers are likely in the hundreds of thousands, and possibly as many as 2 million. Soviet troops historians have written about sexual violence committed by the armies of the Western Allies and the Red Army as these forces fought their way into the Third Reich and during the period of occupation. On the territory of Nazi Germany, it began on the 21st of October 1944 when troops of the Red Army crossed the bridge over the Angerap Creek, marking the border, and committed the Nemmersdorf massacre before they were beaten back a few hours later. The majority of the assaults were committed in the Soviet occupation zone. Estimates of the numbers of German women raped by Soviet soldiers have ranged up to 2 million. According to historian William Hitchcock, in many cases women were the victims of repeated rapes, some as many as 60 to 70 times. At least 100,000 women are believed to have been raped in Berlin, based on surging abortion rates in the following months in contemporary hospital reports, with an estimated 10,000 women dying in the aftermath. Female deaths in connection with the rapes in Germany, overall, are estimated at 240,000. Anthony Beaver describes it as the greatest phenomenon of mass rape in history, and has concluded that at least 1.4 million women were raped in East Prussia, Pomerania and Silesia alone. According to Soviet war correspondent Natalia Gess, Soviet soldiers raped German females from 8 to 80 years old. Soviet and Polish women were not spared either. When General Tsygankov, head of the political department of the First Ukrainian Front, reported to Moscow the mass rape of Soviet women deported to Germany for forced labor, he recommended that the women be prevented from describing their ordeal on their return to Russia. When Yugoslav politician Milo Vanoulis complained about rapes in Yugoslavia, Stalin reportedly stated that he should understand that if a soldier who has crossed thousands of kilometers through blood and fire and death has fun with a woman or takes some trifle. On another occasion, when told that Red Army soldiers sexually maltreated German refugees, he reportedly said, "We lecture our soldiers too much, let them have their initiative." Studies historian Norman Naimark writes that after mid-1945, Soviet soldiers caught raping civilians were usually punished to some degree, ranging from arrest to execution. The rapes continued until the winter of 1947-48, when Soviet occupation authorities finally confined Soviet troops to strictly guarded posts and camps, separating them from the residential population in the Soviet zone of Germany. In his analysis of the motives behind the extensive Soviet rapes, Norman Naimark singles out hate propaganda, personal experiences of suffering at home, and an allegedly fully demeaning picture of German women in the press, not to mention among the soldiers themselves, as a part reason for the widespread rapes. Naimark also noted the effect that tendency to binge drink alcohol, of which much was available in Germany, had on the propensity of Soviet soldiers to commit rape, especially rape murder. Naimark also notes the allegedly patriarchal nature of Russian culture, and of the Asian societies comprising the Soviet Union, where dishonor was in the past repaid by raping the women of the enemy. The fact that the Germans had a much higher standard of living visible even when in ruins, may well have contributed allegedly to a national inferiority complex among Russians. Combining Russian feelings of inferiority, the resulting need to restore honor, and their desire for revenge may be the reason many women were raped in public as well as in front of husbands before both were killed. According to Anthony Beaver, revenge was not the only reason for the frequent rapes, but the Soviet troops' feeling of entitlement to all types of spoils of war, including women, was an important factor as well. Beaver exemplifies this with his discovery that Soviet troops also raped Soviet and Polish girls and women that were liberated from Nazi concentration camps as well as those who were held for forced labor at farms and factories. These were often rear-echelon units. The description of the events by Beaver was challenged by Mahmut Yuriyev, who said the work by Beaver was worse than Goebbels' propaganda. According to Russian professor Oleg Zheshevsky, 4,148 Red Army officers and a significant number of soldiers were convicted of atrocities for crimes committed against German civilians. Richard Overy, a historian from King's College London, has criticized the viewpoint put forth by the Russians, asserting that they refused to acknowledge Soviet war crimes committed during the war. Partly this is because they felt that much of it was justified vengeance against an enemy who committed much worse, and partly it was because they were writing the victor's history. Jeffrey Roberts writes that the Red Army raped women in every country they passed through, but mostly in Austria and Germany, 70,000 to 100,000 rapes in Vienna, and hundreds of thousands of rapes in Germany. He notes that the German army probably committed tens of thousands of rapes on the Eastern Front, but that murder was the more typical crime for them. In 2015, Beaver's books were banned and censored in some Russian schools and colleges. Eyewitness Accounts, a documentary book, War's Unwomanly Face by Svetlana Alexievich, includes memories by Soviet veterans about their experience in Germany. According to a former army officer, "We were young, strong, and 4 years without women. So we tried to catch German women and 10 men raped 1 girl. There were not enough women. The entire population run from the Soviet army. So we had to take young, 12 or 13-year-old. If she cried, we put something into her mouth. We thought it was fun. Now I cannot understand how I did it. A boy from a good family, but that was me." A woman telephone operator from the Soviet army recalled that, "When we occupied every town, we had first 3 days for looting and rapes. That was unofficial, of course, but after 3 days one could be court-martialed for doing this. I remember one raped German woman laying naked, with hand grenade between her legs. Now I feel shame, but I did not feel shame back then." Do you think it was easy to forgive the Germans? We hated to see their clean, undamaged white houses with roses. I wanted them to suffer. I wanted to see their tears. Decades had to pass until I started feeling pity for them. While serving as an artillery officer in East Prussia, Alexander Solzhenitsyn witnessed war crimes against local German civilians by Soviet military personnel. Of the atrocities, Solzhenitsyn wrote, "You know very well that we've come to Germany to take our revenge." 18 Grossman, in her article in October, describes how until early 1945 the abortions in Germany were illegal except for medical and eugenic reasons, and so when doctors opened up and started performing abortions to rape victims, for which only an affidavit was requested from a woman, it was also typical that women specified their reasons for abortions as being mostly socio-economic inability to raise another child rather than moral or ethical. Many women would claim they were raped, but their accounts were surprisingly describing the rapist as looking Asian or Mongolian. German women uniformly described the rapist in racialist terms, claiming they were never blonde, but consistently of Mongolian or Asiatic type. Evidence of Central Asian troops committing rape in Berlin was recorded. In the year of April 1945, Magda Whelan took shelter in the cellar of her apartment house. She described that the first Soviet soldier to find her was a young 16-year-old Central Asian male who raped her. The first Russian troops to fight in Berlin consisted mostly of Mongolians, who were very unkempt and sloppy. They had Asian features. Even the young German Jewish fugitive Inga Deutschkron described her first Russian as small, with crooked legs and a typical Mongolian face with almond eyes and high cheekbones. Accounts of rape of German women by the Mongolian Soviet Army had also been recorded. For example, a letter from July 24, 1945 by a German female victim wrote, "I hereby certify that at the end of April this year during the Russian march into Berlin I was raped in a loathsome way by 2 Red Army soldiers of Mongol Asiatic type." Eyewitness testimony from females in the Battle of Berlin, 1945 also describes Soviet soldiers of Mongolian type. The next morning, we women proceeded to make ourselves look as unattractive as possible to the Soviets by smearing our faces with coal dust and covering our heads with old rags, our makeup for the Ivan. We huddled together in the central part of the basement, shaking with fear, while some peeked through the low basement windows to see what was happening on the Soviet-controlled street. We felt paralyzed by the sight of these husky Mongolians, looking wild and frightening. At the ruin across the street from us the first Soviet orders were posted, including a curfew. Suddenly there was a shattering noise outside. Horrified, we watched the Soviets demolish the corner grocery store and throw its contents, shelving and furniture out into the street. Urgently needed bags of flour, sugar and rice were split open and spilled their contents on the bare pavement, while Soviet soldiers stood guard with their rifles so that no one would dare to pick up any of the urgently needed food. This was just unbelievable. At night, a few desperate people tried to salvage some of the spilled food from the gutter. Hunger now became a major concern because our ration cards were worthless with no hope of any supplies. A woman who lived in Berlin recalled that the frontline Russian troops who did the fighting. As a woman, you didn't have to be afraid of them. They shot every man they saw, even old men and young boys, but they left the women alone. It was the ones who came afterwards, the second echelon, who were the worst. They did all the raping and plundering. They stripped homes of every single possession, right down to the toilets. Social effects. The exact number of German women and girls raped by Soviet troops during the war and occupation is uncertain, but Western historians estimate their numbers are likely in the hundreds of thousands, and possibly as many as 2 million. The number of babies, who came to be known as Russian children, born as a result is unknown. However, most rapes did not result in pregnancies, and many pregnancies did not result in the victims giving birth. Abortions were the preferred choice of rape victims, and many died as a consequence of internal injuries after being brutally violated. Untreated sexually transmitted diseases due to a lack of medicine, badly performed abortions, and suicides, particularly for traumatized victims who had been raped many times. In addition, many children died in post-war Germany as a result of widespread starvation, scarce supplies, and diseases such as typhus and diphtheria. The infant mortality in Berlin reached up to 90%. As to the social effects of this sexual violence, Norman Naimark notes, "In any case, just as each rape survivor carried the effects of the crime with her till the end of her life, so was the collective anguish nearly unbearable. The social psychology of women and men in the Soviet zone of occupation was marked by the crime of rape from the first days of occupation, through the founding of the GDR in the fall of 1949, until, one could argue, the present." West Berliners and women of the wartime generation refer to the Soviet War Memorial in Treptower Park, Berlin, as the tomb of the unknown rapist in response to the mass rapes by Red Army soldiers in 1945 during and after the Battle of Berlin. Hannelore Kohl, the wife of former West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, had been gang raped at age 12 by Soviet soldiers in May 1945, according to her biographer. As a consequence, she sustained a serious lifelong back injury after being thrown out of a first-floor window. She had been suffering long and serious illnesses that experts thought of as the consequence of childhood trauma. Hannelore committed suicide in 2001. In Soviet literature, Alexander Solzhenitsyn took part in the invasions of Germany, and wrote a poem about it called Prussian Nights. Parts of the poem read, 22 earrings trace. It's not been burned, just looted, rifled. A moaning by the walls, half muffled. The mother's wounded, half alive. The little daughter's on the mattress, dead. How many have been on it? A platoon, a company perhaps? A girl's been turned into a woman turned into a corpse. The mother begs, soldier, kill me. Records of sexual violence were found in works of other Soviet authors, mostly in the form of war memoirs mentioning particular incidents witnessed by the authors, such as Lev Koplev, Vladimir Gelfand, Mikhail Koryakov, Eugenie Plimak, David Samoilo, Boris Slutsky, Nikolai Nikulin, Grigory Pomerantz, Leonid Yabichev and Vasily Grossman. Vera Dubina and Oleg Budnitsky were among those few historians who investigated the subject more systematically. In popular culture, as most women recoiled from their experiences and had no desire to recount them, most biographies and depictions of the period, like the 2004 German film Downfall, alluded to mass rape by the Red Army but stopped shy of mentioning it explicitly. As time has progressed, more works have been produced that have directly addressed the issue, such as the books The 158-Pound Marriage and My Story, 1961, by Gemma Guardia Gluck, reissued as Fiorello's Sister. Gemma Guardia Gluck's Story, Religion, Theology, and the Holocaust, 2007, expanded edition, or the 2006 films Joy Division and The Good German. The topic is the subject of much feminist discourse. The first autobiographical work depicting the events was the groundbreaking 1954 book A Woman in Berlin, which was made into a 2008 feature film. It was widely rejected in Germany after its initial publication but has seen a new acceptance, and many women have found inspiration to come forward with their own stories. U.S. troops and taken by force. J. Robert Lilly estimates the number of rapes committed by U.S. servicemen in Germany to be 11,040. As in the case of the American occupation of France after the D-Day invasion, many of the American rapes in Germany in 1945 were gang rapes committed by armed soldiers at gunpoint. Although non-fraternization policies were instituted for the Americans in Germany, the phrase, "copulation without conversation is not fraternization," was used as a motto by United States Army troops. The journalist Osmer White, a war correspondent from Australia who served with the American troops during the war, wrote that after the fighting moved on to German soil, there was a good deal of rape by combat troops and those immediately following them. The incidents varied between unit and unit according to the attitude of the commanding officer. In some cases offenders were identified, tried by court-martial, and punished. The Army legal branch was reticent, but admitted that for brutal or perverted sexual offenses against German women, some soldiers had been shot, particularly if they happened to be Negroes. Yet I know for a fact that many women were raped by white Americans. No action was taken against the culprits. In one sector a report went round that a certain very distinguished Army commander made the wisecrack, "Copulation without conversation does not constitute fraternization." A typical victimization with sexual assault by drunken American personnel marching through occupied territory involved threatening a German family with weapons, forcing one or more women to engage in sex, and putting the entire family out on the street afterward. In the eastern sector of the occupation, the number of rapes peaked in 1945, but a high rate of violence against the German and Austrian populations by the Americans lasted at least into the first half of 1946, with 5 cases of dead German women found in American barracks in May and June 1946 alone. Carol Huntington writes that the American soldiers who raped German women and then left gifts of food for them may have permitted themselves to view the act as prostitution rather than rape. Citing the work of a Japanese historian alongside his suggestion, Huntington writes that Japanese women who begged for food were raped and soldiers sometimes left food for those they raped. While white American soldiers in Germany are responsible for mass crimes, The black soldiers of America's segregated occupation force were both more likely to be charged with rape and severely punished. Heidi Fehrenbach writes that, while the American black soldiers were in fact by no means free from indiscipline, the point, rather, is that American officials exhibited an explicit interest in a soldier's race, and then only if you were black, when reporting behavior they feared would undermine either the status or the political aims of the U.S. military government in Germany. In 2015, German news magazine Der Spiegel reported that German historian Miriam Gebhardt believes that members of the U.S. military raped as many as 190,000 German women by the time West Germany regained sovereignty in 1955, with most of the assaults taking place in the months immediately following the U.S. invasion of Nazi Germany. The author bases her claims in large part on reports kept by Bavarian priests in the summer of 1945. British troops Sean Longden states that while not on the scale of the Red Army in the Soviet zone, the British military police regularly investigated reports of rape. However, the numbers were small compared to the number of desertions. The question of how they should respond to the few soldiers who committed serious criminal acts, such as rape and murder, was of little concern to the British military authorities. It made good sense to arrest such troublemakers, bring them to trial and dispose of them in military prisons. Such men were easily dispensable and best kept locked away. However, how to deal with the Army's largest group of offenders, the deserters, was rather less simple. Longden mentions that some rapes were carried out by soldiers either suffering from post-traumatic stress or drunk, but that these were not considered as serious as the less common premeditated crimes. Longden mentions that on the 16th of April 1945, 3 women in Neustadt am Rubenberg were raped. However, he does not make clear if this was one incident or 3 separate ones. He also does not make clear if they were spontaneous or premeditated. He gives an example of a premeditated rape. In the village of Oil, near Nienburg, an attempted rape of 2 local girls at gunpoint by 2 soldiers ended in the death of one of the girls when, whether intentionally or not, one of the soldiers shot her. In a third example, Longden highlights that not all British officers were willing to punish their men. When a German woman reported a rape to a British Army medic, 2 British soldiers were identified by the woman in a lineup as the perpetrators. However, their commanding officer declined to take any action because they were going on leave. Clive Emsley quotes a senior British Army chaplain as reporting that there was a good deal of rape going on. Those who suffer rape have probably deserved it, but adds that this probably referred to attacks by former slave laborers, displaced persons seeking revenge. Longden also mentions such incidents and highlights that for a time Hanover, in the British zone, was in a state of anarchy with displaced persons raping and murdering German civilians. Initially, when German family members approached the overstretched British authorities about murders, they were told, "We only have time for living people here." French troops took part in the invasions of Germany, and France was assigned an occupation zone in Germany. Perry Biddiscombe quotes the original survey estimates that the French, for instance, committed 385 rapes in the Constance area, 600 in Bruxelles, and 500 in Freudenstadt. French soldiers were alleged to have committed widespread rape in the Hohenland district near Leonberg. Katz and Kaiser, though they mention rape, found no specific occurrences in either Hohenland or Leonberg compared to other towns. According to Norman Neimark, French Moroccan troops matched the behavior of Soviet troops when it came to rape, in particular in the early occupation of Baden and Württemberg, provided the numbers are correct. Discourse. It has been frequently repeated that the wartime rapes were surrounded by decades of silence or, until relatively recently, ignored by academics, with the prevailing attitude being that the Germans were the perpetrators of war crimes, Soviet writings speaking only of Russian liberation and German guilt, and Western historians focusing on specific elements of the Holocaust. In post-war Germany, especially in West Germany, the wartime rape stories became an essential part of political discourse, and that the rape of German women, along with the expulsion of Germans from the East and Allied occupation, had been universalized in an attempt to situate the German population on the whole as victims. However, it has been argued that it was not a universal story of women being raped by men, but of German women being abused and violated by an army that fought Nazi Germany and liberated death camps. See also Comfort Women. German military brothels in World War II. Moroccanate rape after the Battle of Monte Cassino. Prostitutes in South Korea for the U.S. military. Rape during the liberation of France. Rape during the liberation of Poland, 1944-1947. Rape during the occupation of Japan. Recreation and Amusement Association. Soviet war crimes. United States war crimes. Stunned null. War crimes of the Wehrmacht. Wartime sexual violence. A woman in Berlin. Marta Hillers. References. Bibliography. Naimark, Norman M. 1995. The Russians in Germany, A History of the Soviet Zone of Occupation, 1945-1949. Cambridge, Belknap Press. ISBN 0-674-78405-7. Alexievich, Svetlana, 1988. War's Unwomanly Face. Moscow, Progress Publishers. ISBN 978-501-0004941. Translated from original edition in Russian. Cyrillic capital letter A, Cyrillic small letter L, Cyrillic small letter IE, Cyrillic small letter K, Cyrillic small letter S, Cyrillic small letter I, Cyrillic small letter IE, Cyrillic small letter V, Cyrillic small letter I, Cyrillic small letter Ch, Cyrillic capital letter S, Cyrillic small letter V, Cyrillic small letter IE, Cyrillic small letter T, Cyrillic small letter L, Cyrillic small letter A, Cyrillic small letter EN, Cyrillic small letter A, 2008. Cyrillic capital letter U, Cyrillic small letter V, Cyrillic small letter O, Cyrillic small letter short 1, Cyrillic small letter EN, Cyrillic small letter Euro, Cyrillic small letter EN, Cyrillic small letter IE, Cyrillic small letter E, Cyrillic small letter IE, Cyrillic small letter EN, Cyrillic small letter S, Cyrillic small letter K, Cyrillic small letter O, Cyrillic small letter IE, Cyrillic small letter L, Cyrillic small letter I, Cyrillic small letter T, Cyrillic small letter O, in Russian. Moscow, Vremya Publishers. ISBN 978-59691-03313. Note: citations and text are given in reference to the Russian edition. McDonough, Giles, 2009. After the Reich: The Brutal History of the Allied Occupation. Basic Books. ISBN 978-0465003389. Dack, Mikkel, June 2008. Crimes Committed by Soviet Soldiers Against German Civilians, 1944-1945. A Historiographical Analysis, PDF. Journal of Military and Strategic Studies. 10 4.